Hello everyone, this is Clausius, and welcome to my very first Starcraft 2 video. So this is going to be pretty much a tutorial video, just an introduction to Terran for complete beginners. We will be playing the very easy AI. And this video, the only thing it assumes is that you know the rules of the game and how to pretty much start a game and play against a computer. So as long as you can play against a computer, you should be good to go. But this is going to be a beginner tutorial for Terran, and I'm planning to make some more tutorial videos on different sections of the game and different types of things like engagements and how to play as Zerg, as Protoss, etc. And hopefully these videos will be helpful to some beginners. Alright, so this is mostly just to put out more content for StarCraft, and I've taught in other games as well, and StarCraft is a game that I find very fun, so I thought maybe I could try and make some tutorial videos for these as well, and hopefully you guys will enjoy them. For me, about me, I'm right now I'm Platinum 2 Terran and like Gold and everything else, but I figured teaching would help me learn more about the races and help me with the basics and stuff. So hopefully that helps out. So the first thing we're going to focus on is pretty much what you want to do at the start is just always be making workers. So you can see I'm always making a worker, but try not to queue up past 2. If you can get in the habit of that, it would be very helpful. The second thing is always be using the hotkeys. So down here you can see my letters are S and B and P and whatnot. Always try to be using the hotkeys. Never click down here. The only time I would ever look down here is to see what it does or to look what the hotkey is in case I forgot or whatever. So we always want to work on making our units and using the hotkeys. So that is pretty much what we're going to focus on, is just making SCVs, and then we're going to make supplies and make our basic unit, which is a Marine. So the first thing is focus on making SCVs, and the first thing I did when I popped into the game was actually assign it to my hotkey. You can do that with Control 5 or 4 or Shift. Shift adds, Control sets. So what that means is if I'm selecting Command Center, I hit Control 5, it'll set the Command Center as that hotkey. But if I hit Shift 5, then it'll add it to what was ever there previously, and if there's nothing there, then it'll just set it as if it was Control. So the first thing I do is usually set 4 or 5. Whatever hotkey setup you want to use, whatever you feel comfortable, you can go ahead and do that. But the reason I choose 4 and 5 is because usually I leave 1, 2, and 3 as my army and specialty units. 4 is my production buildings, and 5 is my command centers. And this is just my personal preference. There are many types of ways you can do it. And there are also many hotkey setups. So I'm using kind of the default hotkeys, but I know that there's a more popular one called the core, I believe, according to some other tutorial videos I watched. There's a hotkey setup called the core, and I believe it pretty much assigns the hotkeys per where these boxes are in the section. So for example, I think this would be Q, W, E, R, T, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know the core. But I was very fascinated by it, and I considered learning it, but I'd already learned the default hotkeys, and I wasn't sure. So if you want to learn the core or you want to learn some other hotkey setup, go ahead and look that up and figure out what you think you want to learn first before you start training your muscle memory. Now, as for why I set up 4 and 5, this is just to warm up my fingers. I know a lot of people don't like this or consider this a little spammy for APM, which we'll talk about in a bit. While I'm not trying to spam and raise my APM, I do think it is important for your fingers to kind of get the feel of where the keys are. So I start with 4 and 5, so my hand is always at the same spot, so that way I can know where the S is, know where the A is, and know where everything is from the very start, because my initial starting hand position at 4 and 5 is where it is, and so it's always in the same position, more or less. Alright, so once you have your basic setup for the hotkeys or whatever, and you start doing that, the first thing you want to do is start making SCVs and then make your first supply. So usually for Terran, we want to make our first supply over here by the ramp, simply because you can block off the ramp, and these supplies actually go up and down, so you can actually block the ramp and then lower it, let your units out, and if someone comes up, you can raise it to block them out. And that's what we're going to start with. And here I'm just going to have 1 or 2. I have plenty of minerals. But the main thing you want to look at is going to be this supply up here. and your hotkeys down here. So go ahead and get my barracks going. So I'm going to set this to 4, and I'm going to tap 4, right click to have the waypoint set. So I'm going to get rid of that. So what we want to focus on is the supply right here. Make sure we don't get supply blocked, and then hit 5 and make sure we're building. Hit 4 and we're going to make sure we're building. And that's pretty much it. We will have an army hotkey, but we're not going to really do that much with it in this game. So you can see this races up and down. So now I'm going to start making more supplies. So I'm going to block off the bridge like this, and now you can see this is fully blocked off. And then once I'm done with that supply, I'm going to shift and then right click back on a mineral patch. And this will say when he's done with that, go gather minerals again. This is a really great thing to do. Alright, so I'm just going to start making marines, and I have a lot of minerals. So if you ever notice yourself with a lot of minerals, what you can do is actually select mini SCVs, hit build, barracks, and then hold shift. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm making 5 because I can afford it, but you can just do 1 or 2 or 3 or whatever. If you ever find yourself with thousands of minerals, you need to start placing a lot of buildings very quickly. Alright, so then I'm going to double click my barracks, shift 4, and then set the waypoint. And now you see they're all going to go here. And for all these, I had already set that. I kind of did that without explaining that I did that. My mistake. Alright, so that's pretty much what you're going to focus on, is just supply, barracks, make marines, make SCVs. But the last thing I want to talk about for this first introduction is going to be the orbital. So once you build your barracks, you want to turn your command center into an orbital. This is going to be very important for beginners, because the biggest thing that beginners can struggle with, or one of the big things that beginners can struggle with, is invisible units. It really catches them off guard. They don't know how to handle it. They can't do anything with it. They don't know how to see it. So this can really catch a beginner off guard. And an orbital is a great way to deal with that. So what an orbital will do is it unlocks the mule and the scanner sweep. So what you're going to do is, you can see the C. Whenever you see an invisible unit, you just tap 5. And as long as you have more than 50 energy, you can hit C and then click wherever you are or wherever your army is, and just click that and it'll scan it. And this will reveal any invisible units. So if you ever start losing to invisible units, that's what you want to do. So the main things you want to focus on is supply, don't get supply blocked, and build lots of marines. And I'm going to queue up 2 in each, queue up 2 SCVs, and that's pretty much what you're going to focus on. For the army, I just add the army to 1, and then I go send it to attack. But I don't have enough units yet, but that's pretty much all you're going to do is this exercise, and hopefully you should be able to beat very easy AI, and maybe even easy AI. So that should be plenty to go for the first wave. And S. So I hit 4, A, because that's the hotkey, just queue up a lot of marines. S. And then I'm just going to go back and forth, maybe watch my army. If you ever want to get to your army quickly, just double tap 1, as long as it's on 1. If you want to go to your command center quickly to make supply, just double tap 5, grab an SCV, and whatever. So usually you can have like one person making a supply over and over and over, and once you get several barracks, you can have 2 people making supplies over and over. And you can just hop back and forth and make your stuff. So that's pretty much what you're going to want to focus on. So I can go ahead and show you what that looks like in a new game here in a second. So now that I've kind of lectured about what to do, we can go ahead and try it in another game and actually see what it looks like executed. So if you ever have any questions, of course, leave them in the comments below, and hopefully you do find this advice helpful. There are other tutorials, and I do think there are better tutorials than me, but I thought, what better way to learn more about StarCraft than to teach it? So I'm attempting to add some teaching videos, and hopefully somebody finds this helpful, and as always, you guys can watch other videos as well, but maybe I taught you something that you didn't know. And that's what I'm hoping for. All right, so we're going to do this exercise, and then we'll look at the stats afterwards. So remember that we're just going to focus on supply, and a good rule of thumb is if you're in the beginning, you probably want to try to get to where you are 10 supply over. So if it's at 13, maybe you want to be at 23, or you want to get to that point. You don't have to start with that, but because you're only making 1 unit at a time, but you want to kind of work your way up to that. And then once you get like expanded and lots of buildings, then you can start doing like 20 over, and that could be a good rule of thumb. And those numbers came from, I think, a video I watched by Pig, who is a professional Starcraft player, and I thought that was a good rule of thumb to have for the basics, and pretty much that's where I got the numbers from. It was one of his basic videos, and I highly recommend checking him out. I thought he had some good videos as well. Alright, so we're watching our supply, 16 out of 23, so let's go ahead and make that supply. There, and keep it back. Keep making SCVs. And the reason I'm highlighting, it's mostly to, so I'm tapping 4 and 5 to keep an eye on this, keep an eye on the bar, as well as warm up my fingers. And I'm highlighting to warm up my mouse hand. This is important to practice highlighting. You can do it in different directions as well. Highlighting your SCVs, simply because it is useful if a flyer unit comes in and starts attacking them, it is useful to be able to highlight them all and then right click to save them. Alright, I'm going to build my orbital. You come here and build another barracks. Alright, I'm at 20, so I'm about to be at 10, so I'm going to go ahead and make another one. And grab you, come over here. You want to just get used to this exercise. Alright, SCV is about to pop up.
Command center upgrade complete.
Alright, I have 50 energy, so I can use a mule, and what a mule does is basically gives you more mineral. It'll collect minerals very fast for you. But if you're worried about anything invisible, then you don't want to use it. But you can't have invisible units within 2 minutes, so it's okay to call it down if you want. You can also scan their main base if you ever want to see what they're doing. Usually it's better to send a unit and use your mules because it's worth more. But you can do it if you want. It's not that big of a deal for this level. Alright, let's go ahead and get another supply.
Not enough minerals.
And you can see that I'm over SCVs, but I'm still going to produce them just to get in the habit of producing them. Because once you start expanding, you won't stop producing until like you get to like 60 SCVs. And you can always highlight over this. You usually want to go up to maybe, I think the rule of thumb is 3 saturated bases, which means 16 plus 3 on both gases. So 3 fully saturated bases is kind of where you would stop making SCVs, but don't worry about it right now. This level, just make SCVs, make Marines, and make supply, and don't get supply blocked. So I am under, so I'm going to make a second one. Alright, you come here. Make that one. I want to try to constantly be a little bit more than 10.
Not enough minerals.
Add these hotkeys, and I think we're almost good here. Alright, you build another one. Alright, so I do have another 150, so let's go ahead and make another one. Keep our money low. Now, I could just do one at a time and just keep watching, because I am watching as closely as I can. I could build barracks sooner. But I think for beginners, it's just to make sure you don't miss stuff. It's a little bit easier to queue up to the second one and then worry about lowering that to get more minerals later at the higher levels. For complete beginners right now, I think it's more important to make sure that you are actually making stuff more than anything else. Alright, I think this is good enough for this, so let's go ahead and send an attack. Add him to the hotkey. Alright, and this is pretty much it. So 64 out of 79. So let's go make another one. And then when you're done, make another one.
Not enough minerals. Not enough minerals.
Alright. Let's go check the expansion. And I just click the mini map. I can also double click my army. Alright, let's go here.
Mineral field.
And you should just be able to A-click in. Alright, get a supply. Should be good.
Not enough
I got
minerals.
more Marines. Double click and click it. And that's pretty much it. We should have this game
Not
won.
enough minerals.
Alright, and if I wanted to finish it quicker, I could just take, hey, you guys, move forward and attack. You're not doing anything, move forward and attack. And that's just if you have the extra APM to do it, don't worry. If you don't worry about it.
Not enough minerals.
Alright, and that's pretty much it. So now we're going to look at the score screen and see how we did. So in this performance, what you want to look at is the time supply capped. You want to keep that very low, as close to 0 as you can. An AI can keep it at perfectly 0. Usually humans, you don't get perfectly 0, but as long as you're like under 30 seconds, I think you're doing pretty darn good. Average unspent resources, you want to keep that low, but in the late game that can go up. But at least for like under 10 minutes, you probably want to keep that as low as you can. So as long as you're doing good on these two things, I think we're good. APM wise, I did a really high here, but you can see that that's not my average. It was just because I had very little things to do, so I just kept double clicking just to watch and keep my hand warmed up because I don't want my hand to like freeze up or anything. So usually you have more stuff to do, and when you have to think more, your APM lowers a lot. So for beginners, I think the APM you want to aim for is in the 40 to 60 range. So I know there's a lot of controversy on having high APM, and I want to talk about my opinion on that. And basically my opinion on APM is I don't want you to spam it. Like I definitely spammed it a bit to keep my hand warmed up, but I was still doing my actions. So when I wasn't doing my actions, when I was just watching and waiting, I wanted to keep my hand warmed up for the button, so that's why I did that little spammy action. And yeah, it does raise your APM, so I don't really care that it's over 200, over 100, as long as I'm getting my actions done. But the reason I say 40 to 60 is because I do think there is a minimum amount of APM that you're going to need to get to simply to do things. So what that means is if you have 7 APM, you're doing 7 actions per minute. And I think that is just too little. You aren't doing enough. You're not producing enough. You're not making enough. You're not building enough. You're not doing anything or doing enough things. So I think if you can get to 40 to 60 APM without really spamming or anything, if the spam, I don't worry about measuring or whatnot. Just make sure you're getting things done. And when you do that stuff, it'll naturally increase your APM and what you're doing. So APM is kind of a measurement for how much you can do per minute because it's actions per minute. And you can spam the 4 or 5 clicking and everything else to get it really high, but the goal of that, the reason I do it is to keep the hand warm up, is not to raise my APM because I think that's an inaccurate reflection of how much I can do per minute. A high APM does not reflect how much you can do, but if you can do a lot, it will reflect in the APM. Hopefully that makes sense. Basically, I want you to be able to do things and do them efficiently. And if you are not doing them, but you have a high APM, then maybe you're spamming a bit. So what I want to see is if you're doing nothing and you keep your hands warm, that's fine. But what I don't want to see is you spamming 4 or 5 and clicking and stuff, and yet you're missing SCVs or missing unit productions or not spending your minerals on more buildings or getting supply blocked. That means you are spamming. That means the warm-up is now becoming a detriment to your play, and it would be better if you didn't do it. So the keeping the 4 and 5 or hitting the hotkeys and clicking and stuff should never be a detriment to your play. If it is, then you need to stop doing it or you need to cut down on it, because what you need to focus on is actually doing things, and then you can worry about keeping your hands warm after that. But that's usually why you see a lot of controversy about that. Well, while the pros do it constantly, they constantly hit things and click things to keep their hands warmed up, but then the amateurs maybe do it and they have high APM too, but maybe they don't do as much, and then you get into the argument of, well, he's just spamming or something like that. Yeah, he has high APM, but how much did he actually do or how much did he actually accomplish? So what you want to focus on is the time supply cap for now, and the average unspent resources. And the APM you want to keep at least at the 40 to 60 range. You can go higher if you want. That's cool. But if you're below that range, you probably want to get better at hitting those hotkeys and making stuff and doing stuff just to raise the APM a bit. Simply because you want to be able to do things in the game. You want to be able to react fast. You want to be able to build stuff. You want to be able to spend your money. So you want to be able to do stuff. And I think 40 to 60 APM is a good start. It's a good amount of APM to work with. It's a good amount of actions that you can work with. And then you just raise the actions efficiency. So hopefully there was a lot of helpful information in this video, guys. Hopefully you guys did enjoy that. And hopefully you guys found this video educational. So I do plan to make more videos for Terran, and then also doing Zerg and Protoss, at least for the beginner level. I don't pretend to be a master level player, I don't pretend to be a great player, but hopefully I can share with you the knowledge that I do have, and hopefully it does help some beginners out. But as always, guys, thanks for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I look forward to seeing you guys next time.